Look at this battlefield. Molokai. Isolated, windswept, surrounded by endless ocean. And yet, this remote island is the inevitable consequence of decisions made decades earlier.
You're referring to the early 21st century, aren't you? The so-called Trump world order hypothesis.
Exactly. What fascinates me is not whether Trump was reckless, but whether he was deliberate. Because if you trace the chain of causality, Iran, the collapse of the Strait of Hormuz, the energy shock, you begin to see something chillingly coherent.
Let's start there then. The war with Iran. Why did the United States lose?
Because it was unwinnable from the outset. Iran wasn't Iraq. It wasn't Afghanistan. It was geography weaponized. Mountains for asymmetric warfare, deserts that shattered logistics, and a population primed for total resistance.
And the Strait of Hormuz?
That was the masterstroke by Iran. They didn't need to defeat the United States militarily. They only needed to deny global flow. Mines, drones, coastal missiles. They turned the strait into a chokehold on the world economy.
So the United States loses not because it's destroyed, but because it fails its objective?
Precisely. The U.S. couldn't secure energy flow, couldn't stabilize the region, and most importantly, couldn't maintain the illusion of global control.
And that's where the real collapse begins.
Yes, oil prices spike beyond control, but it's not just oil. Fertilizers stop flowing, food production collapses in vulnerable regions, semiconductor supply chains break down.
A cascading failure.
A systemic one. Europe freezes, Asia starves for energy, global trade, already fragile, implodes. And suddenly, globalization isn't an asset, it's a liability.
So where does Molokai fit into this?
Molokai is a post-collapse battlefield, year 2162. The Ice Age has already advanced, reshaping continents and coastlines. The Pacific, once a bridge of global trade, is now a contested frontier.
But why here? Why this island?
Because in a fragmented world, islands become everything. Molokai sits at a critical maritime crossroads in the Pacific. It's a forward operating base, a supply node, a surveillance outpost.
So that explains the presence of the two factions, the European Union and the Pan-Asian Coalition.
Exactly. But these are not the EU and Asia we knew. These are survival blocks, hardened, militarized, stripped of ideology.
So why are they fighting here?
Control of the Pacific lifelines. After the collapse, long-distance trade vanished. What remains are secured corridors, routes for transporting synthetic fuel shipments, desalinated water reserves, high-density food supplies.
So Molokai is a gateway?
More than that. It's a choke point in the Pacific. Whoever controls Molokai controls naval movement across this sector. It's not just territory, it's leverage over survival.
So this isn't just a battlefield, it's a lifeline.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so brutal. These soldiers you see, they're not fighting for ideology. They're fighting because if they lose, millions back home starve.
Let's go back to the United States. What happened after the loss?
The U.S. didn't collapse instantly. It transformed. It retreated into what some theorists called the technate, a self-sufficient North American fortress.
So Trump's strategy, if it was a strategy, worked.
In a twisted way, yes. By triggering global collapse, the U.S. forced the world to depend on regional resource blocks. North America became one of the few stable zones.
But at the cost of the global system.
Exactly. The American empire died, but America survived.
And the rest of the world?
Fragmented. Europe consolidated into a militarized union. Asia formed the PAC. Russia became a fortress civilization. Africa became a battleground of resource extraction.
So Molokai is essentially the aftershock of that original decision.
Yes, a delayed consequence. What began as a war in Iran evolved into economic collapse, resource nationalism, and permanent geopolitical fragmentation.
There's something almost ironic about it.
What do you mean?
That a war meant to secure energy ended up destroying the entire energy system and forcing humanity into a more primitive territorial struggle.
That's the paradox of game theory at scale. Sometimes the optimal move for one player destabilizes the entire system.
And now we're here, watching EU and PAC forces clash over an island that used to be peaceful.
Not irrelevant, just underestimated.
Look at those ridgelines, perfect sniper territory.
And the coastline, ideal for amphibious assaults. Whoever dominates the high ground and the landing zones controls the entire island.
So even tactically, this map reflects the larger theme. Control of vantage points equals control of survival.
Exactly. Strategy mirrors geopolitics.
Let me ask you something. Do you think any of this could have been avoided?
That's the question, isn't it? If the system was already unstable, debt, inequality, overdependence, then maybe collapse was inevitable.
So the war with Iran didn't cause the collapse, it accelerated it.
Yes, it was the trigger, not the root.
And now, decades later, soldiers fight in places like Molokai without even knowing why the world broke in the first place.
History rarely survives collapse, only consequences do.
That's unsettling.
It should be, because what you're seeing here isn't just a match in Battlefield 2142.
Then what is it?
It's a simulation of what happens when a global system fails and humanity is forced to start over, one battlefield at a time.
Then maybe the real question isn't about what happened in the past.
No, it's about what happens next.
Because if this is the outcome of collapse, if this battlefield is the future shaped by those decisions,
then tell me, if you had the power to choose, would you try to save the global system or let it collapse and rebuild something stronger from the ashes?